Tonight from the Lowe Memorial Library on the Columbia University campus, welcome to the 2023 DuPont Columbia Awards.
Well, good evening and welcome to the 2023 DuPont Columbia University Awards. I am Nora O'Donnell and thank you for joining me and my co-host from the PBS NewsHour, Amna Nawaz. Tonight we will honor 16 winners and 13 finalists, the best in audio and video journalism from 2021 to 2022. I would like to begin this year's DuPont Columbia Awards ceremony by taking a quick moment to look around and say how great it is to see so many of you in person here tonight. I think this is the, right? This is actually the first time in 3 years that tonight's ceremony is taking place in person. So it is energizing, it is humbling to be with all of you, so many superb journalists here tonight. So welcome back. As you know, journalism is a calling, and at its best has the power to make substantive change in the world we live in, to give voice to the most important stories of our time. For over 80 years, the DuPont Silver Baton has stood for excellence in reporting and commitment to the highest journalistic ideals. We get to recognize the incredible work of our colleagues across different mediums that uphold those ideals. Tonight's honorees are recognized for the quality of their work, this truly phenomenal journalism that we will honor tonight. But we also want to recognize the courage it took to embark on reporting these difficult stories and the doggedness to complete them. As any journalist knows, this type of journalism, the type of journalism that we all do, is met with resistance from many different corners. But all of you here never give up. And that is so incredibly important. Know this, the work that you do is more important than ever. In the era of 24-hour news cycle, the painstaking reporting and storytelling is vital. So tonight, we toast you, the intrepid, gritty, and persistent journalists that are bringing these stories to the forefront, often pushing the envelope of how these stories are presented. So with that, let's get started. Our first award tonight honors courageous breaking news coverage of the two biggest international stories of the year, the withdrawal of American forces from Afghanistan and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. PBS NewsHour made a commitment to cover these stories over time. Special correspondent Jane Ferguson tracked the fate of Afghanistan in the months leading up to the American troops' exit and the immediate impact as the Taliban regained control. Then, just 6 months later, a team of brave reporters and producers fanned out across Ukraine, Moldova, Poland, and Russia itself to report on Russia's devastating invasion of Ukraine with context and empathy. So we'll start in August 2021 as Ferguson covers the chaos at the Kabul airport and then watch some harrowing moments in Ukraine.
Afghanistan has known much tragedy in recent decades, but the cruelty of this moment in history is staggering. The desperation here intensifies every day. People know the Americans will leave soon, and quite likely leave them behind. U.S. Marines and British soldiers hold the line against a swell of terrified, pleading humanity. Nearby, Taliban fighters watch over the crowds of people fleeing their rule, and fire live rounds over their heads. The British forces throw stun grenades when they fear the crowd will overwhelm them. Children suffer under the punishing summer's heat, while desperate parents pass children to the soldiers above.
Presidential Protective Services.
At another entrance point, thousands of men who worked with or for the U.S. war effort push IDs and paperwork through the razor wire at onlooking American Marines. the soldiers can't help them.
I'm working with CIM to do social contact, but not let them coming in. What can I do? That's all my documents.
Nobody's letting you in.
No.
Incoming rounds have started yet another apartment blaze. It seems the Russians are trying to smash the people's spirit.
Everyone experiences this situation in their own way, but people still do their duty. Everyone is worried, but no one talks about it. We keep ourselves to ourselves.
But just as the firemen are starting to get this blaze under control, the area comes under renewed attack. This is the third round of artillery that we've had incoming in the last 20 minutes. These firefighters here behind you, they're also hiding. Everyone's trying to take cover. Let's get down, get down. You can hear the fizz of the shells landing. That means they're particularly close.
Accepting the silver baton for PBS NewsHour's coverage of Afghanistan and Ukraine, please welcome Senior Foreign Affairs Producer Morgan Till.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you so much. Thank you to my dear friend and partner in crime, Anna Navaz, and to her partner and co-anchor, Jeff Bennett. Thank you to the astonishing Judy Woodruff, and to my great boss, Sarah Just, behind me. I don't like being front and center. That's why I'm in the back. But I do love to be arrayed around men like these, and the one woman who is en route to Turkey and could not be here tonight, Jane Ferguson. These are men and women who race toward the fires, who race towards the chaos and the pain at great personal expense. There is no higher privilege than what I do. So there are other people I'd like to thank very quickly. Our Pulitzer Center friends, unrivaled in their efforts to support our work, CPB, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, PBS, and viewers like you. And I'm on the clock here, so I'll just leave you with a grace note. Many in this room, have seen pomegranate season across Afghanistan. We've seen the blanket of sunflowers that litter the scattered black and waxy earth of Ukraine. They come anew in the spring with the westerlies, and let us hope tonight, along with the people of Syria and Turkey, that they come again and favor them in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you and congratulations. The DuPont Awards have a special commitment to local newsrooms. Our next two batons honor outstanding local reporting. That's especially relevant now with fewer reporters covering local lawmakers and even fewer covering how new laws are passed. Fortunately for viewers in Nashville, Tennessee, News Channel 5's Phil Williams and his team followed the money in and out of the Tennessee General Assembly. They uncovered suspect political fundraising, naughty loopholes, and empty promises of ethics reform. With unflagging persistence, the team used sophisticated data searches as well as old-fashioned doorstepping for an ongoing series called Revealed, which the jury called State House reporting at its absolute best. In this excerpt, we'll see Tennessee's Republican Governor Bill Lee pivot under tough questioning from Williams about his support for taxpayer-funded charter schools. These are schools being administered by an out-of-state religious college with controversial viewpoints and close ties to former President Donald Trump.
For decades, Hillsdale College has been a standard bearer in quality curriculum and in the responsibility of preserving American liberty.
This was Tennessee Governor Bill Lee less than 6 weeks ago.
And we are formalizing a partnership with Hillsdale to expand their approach to civics education and K-12 education in Tennessee.
Announcing a collaboration with the ultra-conservative Hillsdale College out of Michigan to open charter schools across Tennessee. And this was the governor today downplaying his role.
Hillsdale is not currently operating here, but they're one who would like to, and they'll go through the same vetting processes as anyone, which will include curriculums.
After our investigation revealed how Hillsdale's curriculum rewrites the history of the civil rights movement, Princeton historian Kevin Cruz tweeted he was, quote, "Not sure if I'm more offended as a historian or a Tennessean," calling it right-wing hackery and mind-blowingly stupid.
Please welcome News Channel 5's veteran chief investigative reporter, Phil Williams.
Well, on behalf of my colleagues, especially the three outstanding photojournalists who stand with me, thank you so much for this recognition. And thank you to our management and to our families for supporting what became a passion project, and my wife Cheryl might tell you a bit of an obsession. The viewer response to this project was incredible. Unfortunately, because of the decimation of the ranks of print journalism, there are fewer people doing this kind of reporting these days, especially at the State House level. During a recent 60 Minutes episode, a Ukrainian journalist had this to say about her reporting in her home country, quote, "I'm afraid of untold stories. I'm afraid we will not be able to tell all the truth that is going on because so much is going on." That is a burden that I also feel. The truth is, in 2023, America faces a similar crisis. There is so much happening at all levels of government, especially at the State House level, and there are just so few of us covering it. And the forces who want to manipulate our democracy are counting on that. My guiding mantra has always been, if I don't do it, who will? With that in mind, let me end with this encouragement to other news organizations who may think that government reporting is boring, that politics is not great television. The reality is America needs this kind of journalism. And if you don't do it, who will? Thank you so much for this honor.
Well said, Phil. We agree with you. These awards also honor reporting with impact, and our next local television winner from NBC5 in Dallas-Fort Worth had that. Investigative reporter Scott Friedman took a deep dive into a criminal enterprise on Texas roads. Fraudulent paper tags for sale by criminals to criminals. With gripping narrative, the team uncovered an underworld where criminals infiltrated the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles license plate system. From there, they made temporary Texas license plates, paper tags, and then sold them for millions of dollars on the black market. The series showed how those fraudulent paper tags were used to create ghost cars involved in serious crimes, including drive-by shootings, cross-border drug trafficking, and human smuggling. And the impact? Well, the head of the Texas DMV had to resign, and the Texas state government is now working to close those loopholes.
Fraudulent Texas paper tags have become a tool for human traffickers and drug runners on the U.S.-Mexico border. Federal agents tell NBC5 Investigates even the cartels have been able to get real Texas tags registered to false addresses and then use them to disguise smuggling vehicles. Senior investigative reporter Scott Friedman traveled to the border to see the problem firsthand.
What we found at the border shows how a lack of security at the Texas DMV has opened the door for cartels and human smugglers to get these fraudulent tags. Tags police say smugglers are using to evade law enforcement at the border. A stunning revelation considering Governor Abbott, who appoints the board that oversees the DMV, has made border security a major focus of his administration. Dope smugglers and human traffickers running from state troopers along the U.S.-Mexico border in cars with paper tags. Bodies flying from this car as a human smuggling suspect makes a run for it, crashing through a border crossing gate trying to flee into Mexico. In Laredo, troopers eventually catch up to this truck with a paper tag and discover bales of drugs.
Wow. Yeah, here to accept the silver baton, please welcome senior investigative reporter Scott Friedman.
Wow, for a story about paper license plates, who would have imagined, right? But isn't that one of the best things about investigative reporting? You start with a question, it leads to another question and another, and sometimes you wind up in some places that you never expected. The story prompts a public conversation that maybe leads to some change, and then it reminds us again why we serve these communities, why we do this work in the communities that we serve. In this case, I was so fortunate to be a part of a team that decided to take a deeper dive into a story that had already received some attention. And we went after data to try to show the scope of the problem, to quantify it, and also to visualize the data in a way that would help our viewers and decision makers better understand the threat that these paper tags pose to the public and to law enforcement. These months-long projects like this have a way of kind of consuming your waking hours, and that's time that takes us away from the people we care about most. And so I also want to recognize not only all of you who are being honored here tonight for your work, but also the people in our lives who've sacrificed so that we can do this work. And that, in my case, includes my wife Carrie, my daughter Natalie, who are here tonight, my parents, and the families of my great teammates Eva, Jose, and John. Congratulations to all of you, and thank you, Columbia University School of Journalism, for this fantastic honor.
Congratulations. The DuPont jury selected 13 finalists this year with an impressive group of stories. They included a masterful documentary on the Attica prison uprising, an emotional account of the collapse of Miami's Surfside Tower, and 2 historical podcasts, one about the LA riots and one about 9/11. Here are 4 of the 2023 DuPont Columbia Award finalists.
Turning on the morning news is like dipping your hand into a bag of Skittles. Terrified, you'd pull out the yellow one, or an orange one, or the dreaded
red. Severe risk of attack. Airports and subways could be shut down.
But even then, it rarely came with anything to actually act on or to do about it.
No specific targets, no specific dates of any potential attacks, but U.S. officials...
Her apartment's there. The valance of her curtain is blowing in the wind. Her 2 suitcases are on the edge of the ledge of where her apartment was. 30 feet left or right, that's the essence of life. That's it.
I tase him. 50,000 volts of electricity.
The taser darts hit King in the back, dropping him to his knees. King tried getting to his feet and turned toward Kuhn, who fired the taser again and hit King in the chest. Rodney King groaned loudly and fell.
Got on the microphone. Everybody in D Block Yard, put your hands in the air, and you will not be harmed.
Go to the nearest state police officer, and you will not be harmed.
You will not be harmed.
You will not be harmed.
You will not be harmed. But that was bullshit.
Please welcome now my co-host and colleague, Amna Davaz, who is also the co-host of PBS NewsHour. Amna?
Thank you so much, Nora. Good evening, everyone. I am delighted to be here to celebrate and to honor some of the best journalism of the last year. A year in which we continued to grapple with the impacts of the coronavirus and what a post-pandemic world even looks like. A year that saw the first full-scale war on the European continent since World War II, and a year in which Americans continued to reckon with our nation's history of racism and inequities and forge a path forward. The journalists in this room rose to meet the moment and set a new bar for journalistic excellence. Now, I know there are also students from Columbia's journalism school in the room with us tonight. That's right, give it up. We hear you. My father was a student here 50 years ago. He was a journalist in Pakistan, and a scholarship to the J School is what brought him to the United States. That's for my dad. There you go. He taught me to always ask tough questions, to listen carefully, and to choose my words wisely. That is what makes good journalism, and that's what we need at this moment in history. More good journalism. So here is to all the finalists and the awardees who believe in that and who work towards that every single day. And now, back to the winners. In our digital age, when financial institutions, government offices, and power grids all rely on computers to function, we've never been more vulnerable to cyber attack. The next silver baton goes to sobering investigative reporting from 60 Minutes on the growing threats to American cybersecurity, especially from Russia. The jury called this series of 4 reports from 60 Minutes and correspondent Bill Whitaker chilling and said, quote, "This is a valuable public service to alert the audience of the clear and present danger of cyber warfare." In this excerpt from National Security in the Information Age, we'll see how Russia easily crippled the Ukrainian power grid.
The Russians, they broke into 3 different power companies across Ukraine, probably about 6 months ahead of the actual attack. So they broke in over the summer, got into position, and they started learning how to operate those systems. And as a result, they disconnected over 60 substations across Ukraine and caused blackouts for around 225,000 customers in the dead of winter.
It was all done remotely from this building in Moscow by hackers with the military intelligence agency, the GRU. The Ukrainians had to send utility workers to the impaired substations to manually restart each one. A year later, Lee says, GRU hackers were back with a much more sophisticated attack, a piece of malware that could cripple multiple transmission stations with one keystroke. What did it mean that Russia was able to do this?
It was a shock to everybody because there's been a lot of theory around how you could do this. People in my community on the cybersecurity side have been talking about this for a long time on it's possible, but to actually see it demonstrated is a giant proof that you can do it. And we also know now they're bold enough to do it.
Could the Russians do the same thing here in the U.S.?
Absolutely.
Congratulations to Bill Whitaker and 60 Minutes.
Wow. Thank you very much. And thank you to my team here. Just this past week, the FBI arrested 2 people, self-described neo-Nazis, who allegedly were plotting to launch an attack against the electric grid in the city of Baltimore, planning, in their words, to destroy the whole city. And over the past few months, nearly a dozen substations have been attacked in Oregon, state of Washington, North Carolina,
causing widespread outages. We chose to investigate these stories at what we called the intersection of technology and national security because attacks on the grid, cyber warfare, threats to our critical infrastructure, they have far-reaching impacts on the lives of Americans. We did another piece in the series on deep fakes, and deep fakes represent a threat to the very concept of what is truth. And all of these pose a threat to our democracy. As journalists, we have a constitutional right, and I think all of us take it as a duty to present clear and fact-based reporting to the American people so we can figure out who we are and where we want to go in this democracy. And it is our hope that this series has provided information for people to help us guide ourselves in this democracy. These are things that have an impact on society today. And so on behalf of myself and my team up here, everyone who has collaborated on these stories, we'd like to thank you for recognizing our work. Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Our next winner from WBRZ in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, is a story we've heard all too often and all too recently: fatal encounters between police and black men. In this case, a single tip came from an unnamed source in a furtive parking lot meeting that ultimately led reporter Chris Nakamoto to expose a pattern of deception at the highest levels of the Louisiana State Police. His relentless investigation over the course of a year took down top brass involved in the cover-up of the murder of a black motorist by a state trooper. More importantly, the WBRZ team's reporting found a disturbing pattern of LSP troopers targeting black people for traffic offenses and for the use of excessive force. This past June, the DOJ announced a civil investigation of the LSP's discriminatory and violent behavior. Let's take a look at WBRZ's Murder, Lies, Hidden Evidence.
Some of Paxton's notes show 7 days after Green's death, Albert Paxton writes, "We felt we should arrest Hollingsworth." Hollingsworth seen on body camera footage beating Ronald Green. On May 27, 2019, at a golf tournament, Colonel Kevin Reeves is approached about this. The notes show someone tells Colonel Reeves our concerns and makes him aware of the case. Colonel Reeves says we can't arrest troopers for turning off cameras because it will set a precedent. 2 months later, Paxton notes that ranking state police brass want to argue the crash killed him. The district attorney in Lincoln and Union parishes, John Belton, meets with investigators on September 9, 2019. We show him the video and go over the entire case. Mr. Belton says the video was the worst thing he's ever seen.
Hollingsworth was able to go for a whole year without being punished or investigated because of his supervisors, because of the people around him, had the same mindset that he had.
I beat the ever-living out of him, choked him, and everything else trying to get him under control.
And they were okay with what he did.
Accepting the silver baton for Murder, Lies, Hidden Evidence, please welcome WBRZ anchor and chief investigative reporter, Chris Nakamoto.
In a city where Lady Liberty towers into the air as a representation of our freedoms, it's symbolic that we're here tonight because a pack of rogue Louisiana State troopers took a man's freedom away. That man's name is Ronald Green, as we just saw. And tonight we'd like to dedicate this award to Ronald Green, who's no longer on this earth, but his story is still being told. We'd also like to dedicate it to his family, who is still in the pursuit of justice some 4 years after his death. Courageous state troopers Carl Cavalier, Albert Paxton, and Scott Brown, just to name a few, they risked their whole careers they're no longer working at state police because their integrity meant so much that they had to stand up against this deception and all these practices. WBRZ TV is one of the few locally remaining TV stations across the country, and without the support of our management, our general manager, Trey Schmaltz, our owners, Jake Manship here, we would not have been able to do this. They were incredible with their support. Also, our investigative producer who assisted on this, Erin McWilliams, she's not with us this evening. She had a baby last week. And to my photojournalist, Joe McCoy here, we've worked together for the past 15 years. We've done some incredible work, and I just couldn't be prouder. He's the best in the business, and we've done some incredible work together. To our families, our spouses, as it's been said before, there's often a lot of sacrifices that go into this. To Jamie and Shona, thank you. We'd like to thank God. We'd like to thank the jurors at Columbia University and the university itself for having us. Our hearts are filled with enormous gratitude. Thank you.
Our next two winners honor outstanding audio reporting. The first goes to This American Life for a look at the backlash to coverage of the Black Lives Matter movement in the summer of 2020. The episode, Talking While Black, explores this pushback, often a reaction against critical race theory with real-world consequences, in this case for three ordinary, bewildered Black Americans suddenly caught in the middle. The jury said it was This American Life at its best, taking a larger issue we thought we'd read everything about and finding a fresh, thought-provoking angle with memorable characters and personal stories. In this clip from Talking While Black, listeners meet a biracial teen in Michigan who was horrified to discover that during the pandemic, her white classmates had held an online slave auction, including a classmate she thought was her best friend, and that she herself had been up for sale.
Another screenshot. Picture of Nevaeh. She's in a red crop top and jeans and a hat, posing near a tree. Written underneath, starting bid 100. Ew, someone comments. Another ew, followed by another.
And then just then and there, like, everything, like, hit. I was disgusted to the gut. Like, it was just like, oh my gosh. Like, I joked with these students before, like, I couldn't believe that they would think of typing something that they thought, like, it would be okay. After, like, everything with Black Lives Matter this last year, it was just like, wow, okay. Showed me the type of person they were.
It's almost like Nevaeh's inside the darker, not funny version of that Eddie Murphy skit. Maybe you've seen it. The one where he goes undercover as a white man and discovers all the things white people do when there aren't Black people in the room. She had a new window into who her classmates were in private in these screenshots.
Please welcome Executive Editor Emmanuel Barry.
Okay. First of all, our team is very honored to receive this award. Thank you. Honestly, this work stemmed from a place of anger. After George Floyd's death and the protest, there was like this teeny little moment where it felt like we could maybe honestly talk about what it meant to be Black in America. It felt like a change. And then backlash. And that backlash made every conversation about being Black into a conversation about CRT. A backlash that was meant in a way to essentially silence Black people. And that's why this hour of radio was made, to ensure that Black people's voices were heard at this moment, and also to let it be known that these ideas about CRT had consequences for Black people. As journalists, we're often told to put our feelings aside, report the truth, but I just want to remind everyone that sometimes our feelings can also be the truth. Thank you again so much for this award.
Congratulations again. Now, another group of 2023 DuPont Award finalists spotlighting local reporting. Stories about corruption in the Baltimore school system, violence against Asian Americans in St. Louis, the thousands of Chicago hit-and-run cases that are not properly investigated, and abuse in Seattle's foster care system.
The punishments targeted youth with behavior problems who often refused placement in a foster home or group home. Social workers say supervisors instructed them to blast air conditioning on a cold night to get the kid out of the car, to keep kids awake all night, to have them sleep in chairs in the office, or to withhold basic necessities like pillows and blankets.
And what do you think of that?
Like, why are we doing this? Like, just, their life's already hard enough.
COVID in the community causing heartache.
Stop Asian hate!
In more ways than one. Attacks on the AAPI community spiking since the start of the pandemic.
They've shot up 2 spas here in Zone 2, so we need to make sure if we have any Asian spas, we need to be checking on them.
My head designer was told that he was responsible for the China virus.
In Maryland, a school's enrollment is based on the number of students enrolled on paper on September 30th. All $15,148 are delivered to the school based solely off that September 30th number. But a Project Baltimore investigation found millions of those dollars are being sent to educate students who are missing.
Taylor's fiancée, Selena, and his infant son, DJ, were killed June 20th when their car was rammed by someone driving a stolen car with the lights off here at the intersection of State Street and Pershing Road. Taylor survived along with his 12-year-old son, but the driver of the stolen car, which had been pursued by police, fled the scene. 4 months later, the family still knows virtually nothing about what happened.
Please welcome to the podium the director of the DuPont Columbia Awards, Lisa R. Cohen.
Our next silver baton is for climate reporting from NOVA on PBS about a recent phenomenon you may never have heard of. I know I didn't, but it may astonish and horrify you as much as it did the jurors. We're all familiar, all too familiar, with the dire environmental threat to our atmosphere. But this episode focuses on Arctic sinkholes from below. Scientists have learned that entire Arctic landscapes are ticking time bombs as rapidly melting permafrost releases vast amounts of methane, a potent greenhouse gas. This documentary followed the scientists in real time, reported their results using smart graphics, and used beautiful photography. It was alarming to learn how much we don't know about the looming threat in every part of our planet. The cutting-edge research also looked at the impact of this new phenomenon on indigenous populations living on Earth that is shifting or exploding beneath them.
Debris like this can be thrown out by the impact of an asteroid. But there are no other signs of a massive object striking Earth. For the scientists, that leaves only one reasonable explanation: a gigantic natural explosion.
I don't know if there are many Earth system processes that have never occurred. I mean, in my lifetime, or at least to scientific understanding, that have never occurred and that we're starting to see as a new process.
So what could have provided the power for such a massive blast? There is no sign of lava or volcanic rock, so this clearly isn't a volcano. But exploring inside the crater, sampling the air and water at the bottom, the scientists do discover an intriguing clue: unusually high levels of a single gas, methane.
Please welcome to the podium executive producer for NOVA, Chris Schmidt.
Let's do a little photo op. And the baton.
Wow, this is pretty amazing. So on behalf of Julia Court, she and I are executive producers. Meet the executive producer of Nova. And GBH and PBS and Blink Films. We're just so honored to get this award. You know, I think we all feel it, like climate change. It's one of those stories that when you try to talk about it, you immediately polarize your audience. Some people are depressed, some people want to pick a fight with you, and it's a real challenge to try to find a story or a way to tell a story that breaks through that. And for us, Arctic Sinkholes is one of those stories. Because at its core, it's a whodunit. Giant exploding sinkholes in the middle of Siberia. Half a world away, a lake in Alaska catches on fire. What is going on? What's the connection? And the hero of this story, we think, is science and scientists. The people who follow clues to dangerous places and discover that melting permafrost is releasing methane, a potent greenhouse gas, more potent than carbon dioxide, further warming the planet, and around we go. Now, the conclusions are alarming, but the determination of the scientists and the process of discovery gives us hope that human beings, using our brains, can solve problems, even problems as daunting as this one. We're so grateful to be able to tell stories that remind us just how powerfully inspiring that process and science can be. Thank you.
And now it is my privilege and my great pleasure to introduce you to the Dean of Columbia Journalism School and my new boss, Jelani Cobb.
Good evening. I'm here at this celebration of the DuPont Columbia Awards to welcome all of you and to thank several important groups of people who made tonight's event possible. First, a well-deserved thank you to the small but mighty DuPont Awards staff here at the Journalism School who make the awards happen every year. And it is indeed a year-long effort. We are fortunate to have our veteran stage manager, Terry Benson, here. He keeps everything running like clockwork. Second, thank you to the DuPont jury who chose tonight's honorees. Even before the jury met, almost 100 screeners, many of them former DuPont winners themselves, evaluated almost 600 entries. Then the jury convened in October for 3 days to select 30 finalists and later met again to choose the 16 winners. Will the members of the jury please stand? For your time and dedication to upholding journalistic standards for the profession and for the public, thank you. It's also important to acknowledge and thank the staff and trustees from the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. Many of you are here tonight. Welcome, and you please stand. By maintaining the legacy of Jesse Ball DuPont to honor her husband, Alfred I. DuPont, you help us reinforce the standards of excellence for journalists everywhere. Thank you. With their support, we're also able to offer partial scholarships to 2 students. I'd like to introduce this year's DuPont Fellows. Lou Palmer, and Jiayu Liang.
Thank you. Thank you very much and good evening. We'll return to honoring more winners shortly, but first, we're here to tell you how the DuPont Awards came to be and more about what we are celebrating this evening.
Jessie Ball DuPont wanted to create a lasting legacy to honor her husband Alfred I. DuPont's commitment to freedom of information. In 1943, 8 years after his death, the first DuPont Awards ceremony honored radio, then, later, television, and now streaming and online too. Since 1968, the DuPonts have been administered here at Columbia Journalism School.
Our time with the DuPont Awards has been invaluable, a master class, you might say, where we studied what makes a DuPont winner. Invaluable because those criteria are exactly what we strive for as we embark on our journalism careers.
A particular highlight was being in the room over the 3-day jury meeting. Sure, we had read the guidelines for what makes a DuPont winner. As fellows, we prepped the briefing books. But to witness a jury of prominent journalists discuss, debate, and select this year's winners and finalists, that was eye-opening.
DuPont winners are role models to us, to other journalism students at Columbia, and to journalists everywhere.
Let's take a look at what makes a DuPont winner.
Excellent journalism is vital to a decent and robust and strong democracy.
The truth still does matter. Good reporting matters.
When there's disaster, when there's trouble, when other people are running away, journalists are expected to run forward and find the truth for us.
Surveillance cameras capture him arriving at the conference.
If you can tell enough people the truth and tell it in a compelling enough way, it can actually help make change in the world.
He's not responsive right now, bro.
There's no shortage of troubled spots in today's complicated world. Places that cry out for comprehensive coverage.
It's the essence of journalism to convey what it feels like there.
We are the point of the spear for an audience that depends on us to pierce the cover-up, to deflate the myth, to discomfort the error.
This will be hard to watch, but it should be seen.
Exposing injustice, taking a stand, making life better somehow for those less fortunate.
At any given time, somewhere in America, a local television station is peeling away the layers of the smaller society.
Did you falsify campaign documents, sir?
Investigative reporters play a crucial role in our communities by exposing wrongdoings and holding public officials accountable.
These awards keep reminding me that in the fog and the ice, there is land.
Remember, batons are meant to be passed on in the race, so pass on your experience, you winners, and your standards and your ideals to the young men and women in your newsroom.
This endeavor called journalism is truly a noble endeavor, and one that's done to the very highest standards can really make a difference, can really and truly change and shape our world for the better.
Now, I would be remiss as a dean to overlook the fact that there are representatives of very many news organizations in the room, and obviously representatives of the high caliber of students we have at the Columbia Journalism School. So I took the liberty of sliding copies of their resumes under each of your seats. My faculty and my staff here know that I'm shameless. It's like the Glenn Ross, always be closing. The mission of the DuPont Columbia Awards is supported by many individuals who help us champion and honor independent journalism. Their work is heroic and helps us safeguard our democracy. I'm proud to recognize one of those heroes who is with us here tonight. In his role as a trustee of the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund, the organization that supports these awards year after year, he has ensured that we will continue to honor the best in journalism in perpetuity. His tireless advocacy for our mission is truly inspiring. Please join me in thanking DuPont Fund trustee David Llewellyn for his many contributions to these awards. In my capacity as dean, I want to say, David, that your commitment and your diligence and your contributions to this award and to what it has done for the betterment of the journalism world is truly inspiring and courageous. And we, as the Columbia Journalism School, offer our profoundest gratitude and thank you. Every year, the DuPont Awards spotlight urgent and underreported stories in the public interest. Our next audio winner continues that tradition. It is a podcast from Audible, produced and hosted by the actress and activist Erika Alexander, with executive producers Charlemagne the God and Kevin Hart. Finding Tamika features innovative storytelling that delves into the murder of Tamika Houston, a 24-year-old black woman who went missing in South Carolina in 2004. Her case became a rallying cry against the racial bias that affects coverage of missing black women and girls. The jury called the podcast a well-written and epic exploration of crime and the ripples across generations and within families.
Rebecca Howard, Tamika Zahn, worked in PR and tried to do the impossible. She tried to get national attention on a missing black woman.
I would spend a good part of my day drafting media releases, calling up news desks, reaching out to anyone, any contacts that I had in media, phone calls, emails, trying to cast as wide a net as possible. I'm very well aware of, news coverage and so forth. In my naivete, I'm like, hey, we hear about these missing women all the time. And, the nation is captivated by these stories. Certainly, they're going to want to pick up on, well, where is Tamika Houston? And I couldn't be more wrong.
Here to accept the DuPont Award for Finding Tamika, a first DuPont for Audible, please welcome Erika Alexander.
Good evening. When our friends, producers Rebecca Howard and David Person, approached my partner Ben Arnon and me at Color Farm to make an audio series about Rebecca's murdered niece, Tamika Houston, we were determined to explore the reasons for the overwhelming prejudice and racial obstacles that Rebecca's family experienced to gain the attention of the national media when Tamika went missing in 2004. But our other goal was essential: find Tamika. Teaming up with Audible, SBH Productions, and James T. Green and Molten Heart, we created a contemporary storytelling mashup to search for Tamika and to find out who Tamika Houston was before she became the photo negative of a disturbing phenomenon called missing white woman syndrome. But what we discovered was the awful truth that Black girls and women don't have to go missing for us not to see them. Yet through this starless journey, Tamika taught us that sometimes to be seen, you have to glow in the dark. Now that's true Black girl magic. Tonight, thanks to you at the DuPont Columbia Awards and the Columbia University School of Journalism, and the efforts of Black men who elevate Black women in rooms where we're absent, Charlemagne the God and Kevin Hart. Thanks to my mother, Sammy Alexander, the twice-orphaned North Star that guides my steps, and the tenacity and love of Tamika's aunt, Rebecca Howard, for Tamika's mother, Gabriella Simone, and Tamika's family. We see you, Tamika, and you promised that if we looked for you, we'd find ourselves. But you also warned us to keep looking, to keep pushing the media to higher ground, to break its embargo on marginalized stories of missing women of color. So onward, Tamika, and congratulations to everyone being honored here tonight. May we all continue to glow in the dark. Thank you very much.
Congratulations. And Jelani, there's a couple of presidents of the networks here tonight and some executive producers of some very powerful programs. So you can slide them those resumes. Our next two DuPont Awards honor brave reporting on the painful subject of child sexual abuse. A warning, these stories can be hard to hear, but it is critical that we listen and learn. The next DuPont winner, Gimlet's Stolen: Surviving St. Michael's, is a meticulous investigation of reporter Connie Walker's own family history. Walker digs layer by layer into the horrors of one of Canada's notorious residential schools for Indigenous children, horrors that were perpetrated upon her own father and other members of her family. The jury commended this podcast for its consistent focus in pursuing the truth and the breadth of its reporting. This gives me the goosebumps. That reporting led Connie Walker to the archives of the religious order that ran St. Michael's, her father's school. In this clip, we'll go inside the archives as she makes a disturbing discovery about a priest who taught her father.
So I hold them up to the light. But it looks like there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them getting dressed or getting undressed, including one guy who looks like he's in his underwear. There are 2 photos of teenage boys changing in a locker room. Oh my God, one guy looks like he's completely naked in this picture. But why would he take pictures of them undressing? There's not a single mention of abuse at St. Michael's in these archives, but there is this picture of a naked boy in a priest's file. These are the records the Oblates were okay to release to the public. And even though I set out to find an abusive priest, I'm surprised to see something so explicit sitting right here in one of their files. The records I found today show that Father Gauthier and Father Duhaime, both alleged abusers, were at the school at the same time as my dad. They knew him and he knew them.
Please join me in welcoming to the podium producer and reporter Connie Walker in a first ever baton for Gimlet.
Thank you all. This is really an incredible honor, and I'm just ecstatic to be here tonight. Stolen began as a personal story for me, my attempt to better understand how my father's experience at a residential school in Saskatchewan shaped the father that he became to me. But as so many stories do, this story became so much more. We ended up telling a story not just about my dad, but about generations of Indigenous families who survived genocide. After 10 months, our team's investigation uncovered decades of systemic abuse at St. Michael's and hundreds of allegations of sexual abuse against children. It's one of the most comprehensive investigations into a single school, and also into the intergenerational effects that are still being felt by families and communities. This story relied heavily on the generosity and just love of my family, including my two brothers who are here tonight. But we owe our biggest thanks to the survivors of St. Michael's, because without their strength and resilience, I wouldn't be here to help tell these stories or to help celebrate the beauty of our culture. Indigenous people have so many stories that deserve to be told, and we should be supported to help tell those stories. And I want to say a special thank you to the team behind me who helped tell this story. Not only are you all incredibly talented and brave journalists, but you're so kind and generous, and I feel so lucky to have worked with you all. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate this.
Our next DuPont winner is a documentary from Hulu and ABC News, a first baton for the newly created ABC News studios. It's called Leave No Trace, A Hidden History of the Boy Scouts. It explores the long-running cover-up of pedophiles within the Boy Scouts of America, which recently settled with abuse survivors for $2.7 billion. The film showcases the Scouts' secret internal records known as the perversion files about predatory Scout leaders. Along the way, it weaves in the stories of 5 courageous survivors who were abused during their time as Scouts. Director Irene Taylor walks the fine line between tough investigative reporting and highly sensitive, carefully drawn human portraits. Here is one of the survivors.
Who's Lonnie Barnes?
Lonnie Barnes was the Scout leader who, yeah, trusted, right? Who was the Assistant Scoutmaster of the troop I participated in. Lonnie Barnes was never at camp, so camp was a safe place for me. But one year he was hired at camp, and I knew what he was doing to me, and I could see the signs of what he was doing to other boys. And he didn't last at camp more than a week, and he got fired. And I was like, one of the best days of my life. He was rushed out of camp. They said they found a liquor bottle outside of his tent. And I'm thinking to myself, hell no. Hell no. Lonnie Barnes went and touched one of those boys. And they decided we can just get this out of here. End of story, end of case. He left camp, but he was still in scouting for the rest of my whole scouting career. It did not affect his participation at all in the program.
Nauseating. Yeah. To accept the silver baton for Leave No Trace, please welcome Director Irene Taylor.
The making of this film started here, right here, in the building across there at the J School. Nigel Jaquist and I were students, colleagues. We were mid-career journalists who came there and eventually moved out to Portland, Oregon. Nigel became a Pulitzer Prize writer. I went into filmmaking, and I think we both were needed to make this story. It couldn't have just been journalism, and it couldn't have just been filmmaking. It had to be both, which is why this honor tonight is so valuable, I know, to both of us, because this is about veracity. It's about saying this is important, and it's about telling the men and boys in our film that you believe them, and that what happened to them is significant, not only to them, but so that we can understand how our most trusted institutions in America, we are vulnerable to the power to hurt children. And they had that power, and they had congressional oversight. You know, this week, Nigel and I were marveling that Congress can investigate ticket sales of Taylor Swift, but they haven't yet investigated the Boy Scouts with a charter that they've had for 80 or 90 years. Tonight, we have several people from the film that I would really like to recognize. Right here. And you know, there's been some mention here tonight, well-deserved, of the spouses and families of the filmmakers or the documentary film folks and radio people and journalists. But I actually want to acknowledge tonight your wives and your parents. Because when you make a film about people who come forward, they are not just outing themselves. They are actually talking about trauma that is embedded in their families. It may have been embedded in their family before them, but it certainly comes after them. And I met wives, and I met the parents who are in the audience tonight of the boys in our film. And Nigel and I shared the responsibility of interviewing these families. And we started this project really from our relationship as friends and journalists, but we never would have gotten here if it weren't for Sarah Bernstein with Imagine Entertainment, who quickly said, yes, we'll get in on this with you. And we took it to Jackie Glover and ABC News Studios, and that is really how we have brought the film to the world. So thank you all tonight for this, but really thank you for giving this and your recognition to the men in this film.
Thank you. Abuse fosters in silence, and your reporting and your work is helping to change that, so thank you. Here is a look at the last of the 2023 DuPont finalists, 5 works of long-form coverage on a range of topics. People missing at the U.S.-Mexico border, a mysterious ailment attacking government workers, the legacy of Southern Civil War memorials, PTSD and its impact on veterans' families, and the strain COVID placed on our medical workers at the height of the pandemic.
Being born in the Bronx from Haitian parents, I'm not that far removed from a lot of my patients. And every time you see the patient, you can't help but say, damn, this can easily be my mom.
We realized there was a big problem along the border, and I don't think anybody realized just how big it was. We were trying to answer the question, how many people have died along the U.S.-Mexico border? You couldn't answer that. We realized we hardly knew anything.
I'm here because I'm tired of the gaslighting that keeps happening from the US government. I'm tired of this yo-yoing because I'm watching new colleagues and friends that I've trained with and friends that I've known for years that are being sent to these countries and coming back a shell of their former selves. We need to help them and we need to stop this.
Look at the story they're telling today. That the Confederacy was a bunch of evil men fighting to keep people in bondage, and it's all horse hockey.
What Mommy said, I'm sad. Sometimes I talk to my dad or I talk to my brother about how I feel and what I'm doing to try to help.
Does it work sometimes?
Yes, it works sometimes because I need somebody to talk to.
Our next 2 DuPont winners focus on the fight for abortion rights, a topic that rocked the country in 2022 in the wake of the Supreme Court's ruling that overturned Roe v. Wade. The first DuPont Award honors a documentary called The Janes that aired on HBO about life in the U.S. in the 1960s before the right to abortion became law in 1973. A group of women who called themselves the Janes banded together to run a safe, affordable, and illegal underground abortion operation in Chicago. The film provides a thoroughly immersive sense of that specific time and place in American history. It also provides a comparison to the current legal and political state of the law. The jury appreciated its context, heart, and humor. In this excerpt from HBO's The Janes, an apartment is raided by police who don't exactly find what they expect.
The abortions were being performed in the 2 bedrooms.
We immediately locked the door to the bedroom, and the woman put her clothes on. We took the equipment and threw it out the window. We waited politely, sitting on the bed, and eventually someone kicked the door in.
I know we didn't kick the door down, so I'm guessing we must have just knocked.
There was this big footprint on the door.
They ran to the bedrooms and started, "Where's the doctor? Where's the doctor?" Opened the windows to see if the doctor was hanging by his fingernails out the window.
We're in that scratching our heads mode. Where's the doctors? There are no doctors. You're not a nurse? The women doing the abortions, that didn't pop into my head. Maybe these are just ladies. The living room was full of women waiting. girls all got silent. I'm looking at these women who are staring at us. A very awkward business.
Martha had put in a pork roast. I guess it must have smelled pretty good because one of the cops asked, "What's for lunch?" And I said, "Pig." I was bad.
Here to accept the DuPont Silver Baton for HBO's The Janes, please welcome directors Tia Lesson and Emma Pildes.
We thank the members of the DuPont Columbia jury for this extraordinary recognition, and HBO documentary films, Lisa Heller, Nancy Abraham, and Sarah Rodriguez, for making it possible for us to tell this story. The women of Jane had the audacity to believe that abortion is more than just a medical procedure to be tolerated. It is a life decision to be honored, respected, and supported with compassionate care. And the women of Jane had the courage to act on those beliefs. May their spirit light a path for those who continue the fight 50 years later.
Two directors, so two speeches. We also want to thank Susan Lacey, Jessica Levin, Daniel Arcana, Max Avery Lichtenstein, and just take a moment to mention our editor, Kristen Huntley, who we lost at the end of last year. As documentarians, it's the unpredictability of life that we're drawn to, and in this scriptless world, it's so often our editors that help us find our way and our story and our greatest collaborators. So on behalf of myself and Tia and Kristen, thank you so much.
Congratulations. Months before the Supreme Court ended the constitutional right to an abortion last June, the Washington Post had already launched extensive coverage looking ahead to a post-Roe America. National political reporter Caroline Kitchener produced a revelatory series for The Post Reports, the paper's flagship daily news podcast. Kitchener built on original interviews, field reporting in the Midwest and Texas, and audio recordings that delivered powerful and intimate stories. Her reporting brought out that ambiguity that so many patients grapple with, their personal moral positions, their families, and their communities. In this excerpt, the reporter is in a Texas exam room with a pregnant woman as the law changes.
The doctor says, we can see your pregnancy, and unfortunately, we can see cardiac activity. We can see this flicker that means that you can, unfortunately no longer get your abortion in Texas. And she just starts crying, and there's more silence. But then the doctor says, don't worry, it's going to be okay. We've got a clinic in Oklahoma. You've just got to get there. We can do that for you. But then she goes out to the front desk and she goes to make her appointment at this other clinic. And the woman at the front desk says, I'm really sorry, but I have to tell you about this other law that could take effect in Oklahoma. And, as early as this Friday, abortion could be banned there too.
Please welcome from the Washington Post, Caroline Kitchener.
When I think about the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned, I think about the sound of the phones ringing. I was in an abortion clinic in Houston, Texas, and the decision had just come down, and everybody was gathered around this computer screen watching this news online. And then the calls started to come in. And one after the other, on 3 or 4 different lines, just ringing and ringing and ringing. And for a good, 3 or 4 minutes, the staff at this clinic, they just stared at these phones. Nobody wanted to be the first person to say, I'm sorry, abortion is no longer legal in Texas. And so the phones just kept ringing. Most of what I do covering abortion at this moment is write stories. But I couldn't write that sound. And I think it's a sound that people really needed to hear. Post Reports, these incredible women standing behind me, they made that clinic and that scene real for so many of our listeners. I want to thank them. I want to thank our families and our partners who made incredible sacrifices this year so that we could do this important work. I want to thank so many people at the Washington Post, Peter and Renita, and so many people who supported this coverage long before it was the top of the headlines. I'm so proud that we did that together this group of women knew how important this story was from the very beginning. Thank you to the DuPont Awards for this incredible honor. It means so much to us.
DuPont award-winning reporting can change laws. Our next 2 winners from local television newsrooms both did just that, taking on the complex and mounting crisis of mental health in America. The first, an investigative series from 11 Alive in Atlanta, delves into a bureaucratic structure that is so daunting that it can lead parents of children with mental health challenges to literally abandon their kids to the state in order to gain access to urgently needed care. Like many great investigative series, Keeping started with a single reporter, Rebecca Lindstrom, looking at a breaking news story and saying to herself, there must be something more to this. Lindstrom spent over a year on this series to explain what happens hundreds of times every year in Georgia. She found cases that spanned the socioeconomic spectrum, from single mothers in financial distress to well-to-do families whose means were no match for the challenges they faced. Keeping made a difference. Legislation requiring health care parity was passed as a direct result of this reporting. With creative graphics, Lindstrom showed the mind game one mother faces to get care for her daughter.
You don't have the evaluation that says exactly what it needs to say to access that care, you're not going to get it. And that just depends on who you see and what their mood is that day.
When Kaylee's behaviors got out of control, she received medication instead of tools to teach her new ways to cope. The roadblock? Georgia traditionally only covers the service for children with autism. Kaylee doesn't have autism, or at least not on paper. Her mom has tried twice to get her tested. She is still on the waiting list. Yet another roadblock. The barriers in the system mean barriers to success. Suicide attempts.
She was asphyxiating, and so I just picked her up and dumped her in the shower, turned on the cold water, called the ambulance.
Kaylee, unable to deal with her emotions, kept running away, ending up in jail, homeless, or even trafficked by strangers for sex. Her mom asked for help with supervision, but she couldn't get that either. Kaylee's intellectual disability wasn't severe enough, and those medical problems never really went away.
Here to accept her DuPont Silver Baton for Keeping, investigative reporter Rebecca Lindstrom.
I think all the journalists in the room can relate to what I think is my absolute favorite part of this job, and that is the ability to show up for work each day and learn, whether it's through the data, through the research, or more importantly, through the lives of the people we meet. When I pitched this series idea to my amazing boss, Erin Peterson, she knew that this was deeply personal to me. She knew that I was curious, and if I'm being honest, I was actually a little disgusted. Disgusted at the idea that a parent could willingly give up their child, especially a child with special needs. But when I think now back and I watch that, all I have for these parents right now is complete and utter respect. Because of their bravery to share their stories with me, to go on TV and openly admit that they had abandoned their children, we do have reforms in Georgia now. But I am still heartbroken that the 14-year-old boy with Down syndrome who started me on this journey will never get to benefit from those reforms, because Sheldon died last year. One parent compared our broken mental and behavioral health care system to a housing developer who only constructs 1/10 of every house. And he asked me, he said, "What's the point of pouring the concrete if you don't build the walls?" And so I just want to thank you for recognizing this work, recognizing these families, because it really is my hope through continued journalism on this topic that we will pour the concrete, that we will build the walls, and hopefully we'll finally begin to construct the roofs. Thank you.
Our next award to Care 11 in Minneapolis was also born out of breaking news and also laid bare systemic mental health failures in their state, and it also got results. Reporter AJ Logo and producer Brandon Stahl documented cases in which severely mentally ill patients found incompetent to stand trial for violent crimes were released back into the community without adequate treatment or supervision and went on to commit assaults, rapes, and murders. The hour-long special, The Gap, Failure to Treat, Failure to Protect, reconstructed a half dozen of these alarming cases in depth. The reporting helped to bring about real change as the state legislature, in the last hours of the year session, passed a law to close the gap. Politicians and victims credited CARE's reporting as the catalyst. This is how one offender terrorized a neighborhood.
He was trying to take you.
Yeah, front of people.
With witnesses calling police, Issa let her go but stole her car. He was arrested 3 days later for aggravated robbery. Amina thought he'd go to prison. Instead, police and court records show he's repeatedly walked free, leaving a trail of sexually assaulted women.
It's clear that he's a ticking time bomb.
Mark Gray is a civil mental health attorney appointed since 2009 to represent Omar Issa. He says Issa, who is severely mentally ill, repeatedly falls through gaps in Minnesota's legal and mental health systems.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that he's a safety risk to both himself and others.
Found incompetent to stand trial for the carjacking, a judge ordered him civilly committed to the care of the Minnesota Department of Human Services to ensure his safety and that of others. It was Issa's fifth commitment. DHS held him at the Anoka Treatment Center less than 6 months before provisionally discharging him back into the community.
I call it a revolving door.
Repeatedly in trouble, Issa bounced in and out of jail, courts, and the mental health system until August of 2020. He's charged with raping a woman on this picnic table while witnesses screamed at him to stop. Again, incompetent to stand trial. Again, civilly committed. Again, provisionally discharged by DHS.
Here to accept his DuPont Silver Baton, please welcome Brandon Stahl.
So I have been told that I'm not supposed to thank people for the speech, but I come from a print background and I don't listen to broadcasters. Was hoping I'd get a little laugh for that. So seriously, there are people I'd like to thank, and those are the people who told us their stories of absolute devastation and loss and trauma that became the background of our series. And they did this hoping that what we exposed, that there were profoundly mentally ill people who were not getting treatment, and that the public was not getting protected, that what we exposed would never happen to anyone again. And because of their courage, we now have pages and pages of new laws in Minnesota and millions of dollars that will be spent to help future generations of people in our state. So I thank them. And I thank these great reporters and journalists too. Thank you.
Our last two awards tonight honor international reporting from CNN. The first is CNN Films' Navalny, which has also just been nominated for an Oscar. It opens an extraordinary window into the complicated life and attempted assassination of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. This riveting documentary follows Navalny's team as they work to identify and expose the members of the secret Russian intelligence team that shadowed and poisoned him. With remarkable access, director Daniel Roher embedded with Navalny, his family, and supporters, and teamed up with cyber investigators, the Bellingcat Collective. Watch this daring cat-and-mouse game as Navalny talks to one of his would-be assassins.
Константин.
Да.
Здрасте. Меня зовут Устинов Максим Сергеевич. Я помощник Николая Платоновича Патрушева. Мне ваш телефон дал Владимир Михайлович Богданов. Извините за ранний звонок. Мне нужно 10 минут вашего времени. Очень сильно нужно.
Да, слушаю.
Мне нужно один абзац. Просто краткое понимание от членов команды. Что у нас пошло не так? Почему в Томске был с Навальным полный провал?
Я бы с удовольствием помог, но я сейчас на коронавирусе сижу дома.
Ну, поэтому я вам звоню. Поэтому...
Давайте я Макшаков если связаться.
Макшакову я позвоню тоже, конечно же. Ну, то есть я сейчас... Это простая процедура. Я буду звонить сейчас Александрову, Макшакову, Таякину. Из каждого буду просить там, на 2 абзаца объяснения. Потому что мне нужно, почему у нас ничего не получилось, и что нужно... Почему было плохо, и что нужно сделать, чтобы хорошо.
Это вот я вопрос себе задавал уже не один раз, кстати. Ну, я оцениваю работу хорошую, по крайней мере. Ну, работа сделана как бы, как вот сделали, как бы, это все прорабатывалось вопрос. И не один раз.
Welcome to the podium, Navalny director Daniel Roher.
I want to make sure my colleagues join me up here, because it takes a village to make a film like this. Hi, guys. So when we set out to make this film, it immediately was clear that there would be many challenges. And one of the main ones is, who would we partner with on a film like this? Well, a lot of big companies were a bit scared of taking on Vladimir Putin, which we understood, but there was one organization that had already been doing extraordinary work, and that was CNN Films and the work of CNN's journalists. So first and foremost, I want to thank Amy Antelis, Courtney Sexton, and Alex Hannibal for their support. Those are the executive producers of the film, for their extraordinary support of the documentary. Next, I need to mention the extraordinary courage of one man in particular who couldn't be here with us this evening, and that's Alexei Navalny. Right now, Alexei Navalny is in a very small solitary confinement cell, a gulag, somewhere outside of Moscow, where the Russian government is trying to murder him in slow motion. I'm sending him strength, and I know that Navalny represents for millions of Russians a flicker of light in a very dark context. And lastly, I want to acknowledge and thank the extraordinary, incomparable Christo Grozev of Bellingcat. It was a few weeks ago that Christo received another unique journalistic distinction of being the first foreigner added to Russia's most wanted list. And that is a direct response to the intrepid work that Bellingcat is doing, both in the Navalny investigation, but now investigating the war crimes unfolding in Ukraine. I want to dedicate this award to Alexei Navalny and Christo Grozev, my two heroes. Thank you.
And now to our final award, to CNN for outstanding breaking news coverage of the war in Ukraine. Beginning in the capital, Kyiv, on the first day of the conflict a year ago this month, CNN reporters, producers, camera people, fixers, and more covered this fast-breaking and dangerous story to the hilt. CNN was there doing live shots literally as the first shells landed. They went on to report in the moment from what felt like everywhere, including live from underground and even under fire. CNN provided a continuous and broad picture of what was going on in the region. But perhaps more importantly, they stayed with the story day in and day out, including longer features inside Ukraine and in many other countries. As you'll see in a minute when the credits appear, it takes hundreds of people across continents to put this kind of reporting on the air. The DuPont jury praised CNN's incredibly strong reporting on every aspect of this story. Here now is a small sample of CNN's Ukraine coverage.
Ukrainians who resist. Oh, I tell you what, I just heard a big bang right here behind me. I thought we shouldn't have done the live shot here. There are big explosions taking place in Kiev right now.
As they're rolling past us now, and now if we pan over, you can see that those vehicles also, John, are now moving forward. Those vehicles are clearly now moving forward towards the territory of Ukraine.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, these 6 other people here, literally while we've been talking to you in the past couple of minutes, more than 10 people have been arrested.
The bodies landed here down this road. Those blue doors you see, that's where the cluster munition shrapnel embedded.
Ukrainian forces are taking us into this area on back roads because they say taking the main roads is simply much too dangerous. They want to show us the damage done when Russian forces tried to enter Kiev.
They're having to climb this sort of twisted metal. Many of them, as you can see, are elderly. They're visibly distressed. It's just an awful, awful scene. And these people are the lucky ones. Можно вам помочь? Можно вам помочь? Мне очень жарко. Это плохая. Можно вам помочь? Давайте мне вот это. Давайте мне.
After 40 days of war, they have turned their temporary homes into a neighborhood. Some have even decorated with fresh flowers. Zina says she's been living down here since the beginning.
Oh, this is my house. Yeah. This used to be my house. Now we cannot live here, obviously, because it has been bombed 3 times in a row.
Okay. Down here, John, down here. Keep on rolling. You see it over there?
We hug the earth. 2 more artillery rounds.
Accepting the silver baton on behalf of CNN Worldwide is Chief International Correspondent Clarissa Ward.
Well, I think you saw there that this is, we are just humble ambassadors for what amounts to an extraordinary team effort. If I read out all the names, we'd be here all night, and I'm conscious that this is the last award of the evening. So thank you for this tremendous honor. I feel so proud and privileged to be part of this team, and I want to stress that in these moments, I feel CNN really kind of steps into its own, and that is because of a massive effort that goes on, yes, in front of the camera with field teams, my colleagues here, many of our colleagues still in Ukraine and Russia at the moment, but also what goes on behind the scenes, whether it's our management, whether it's our security team. Mike Pratt is here, who kept us all safe and managed not to lose all his hair during the beginning of the war, even though it was an extraordinarily stressful time. To our futures teams, our camera, so much logistics goes into this and into making the product that you saw. But I do just want to take one moment to really thank, in particular, our Ukrainian colleagues, because the difference for them in those early days of the war is that they were dealing with the heartache and the shock and the trauma of knowing that their lives had changed forever, that they would never be the same, that they had to try to get their families to safety, and they had the grace and the grit and the determination to keep coming into work, to keep risking their lives, to keep helping us to tell these stories. And so I'm extraordinarily grateful to them, and I wish they could be with us here tonight. And then finally, I just wanted to add that far too many journalists have been killed covering Ukraine, and this is for them, and we will never forget. Thank you so much.
Congratulations again. So, one of the sweetest parts of winning these awards is hearing the good news. You won. And the reactions of some of our 2023 DuPont winners are priceless.
I have a little bit of news.
Okay.
And that is that 60 Minutes, your PBS NewsHour team, finding Tamika.
You and your team have been chosen as a 2023 DuPont Columbia winner.
That's so amazing. Thank you. I love good news.
Oh my God.
I have goosebumps.
Brett, did you hear that?
Yeah.
You just don't know how much this means to us.
Wow. That's really great for these men.
Thank you. I'm really emotional.
We're a small market, and when I tell you, we put our just everything into this.
It's validation, credibility.
Hey, Brian, we're a winner.
Is Brian crying? Just checking.
No, but maybe I am.
I just want to point out, one of the women you saw in that, Jane Ferguson, was supposed to be here tonight, but she couldn't because she's on her way to Turkey. So the work continues. Congratulations to all of tonight's DuPont winners and finalists. Thank you so much for the work you do every day, and good night. We want to invite all the guests here now to continue to celebrate great journalism with dessert and conversation back in the faculty lounge. Thank you so much.